Elon Musk walks into an airport. What happens next stuns everyone around. The airport hummed with the familiar energy of chaos. Rolling suitcases clicking against the tiled floor, muffled announcements crackling over the intercom, and the occasional exasperated sigh of travelers scrambling to make their flights. Among the crowd, no one paid particular attention to the man walking confidently through the terminal. Wearing a crisp black suit with a loosened tie and carrying no visible luggage, he blended into the bustling scene seamlessly. To most, he appeared to be just another businessman, perhaps late for a meeting or returning from one. But this was no ordinary traveler. Elon Musk moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the terminal with a mix of curiosity and focus. The natural light streaming through the high glass ceilings gave the space a polished, almost serene ambience, belying the frenzied pace of the travelers weaving through the corridors. He had chosen not to alert anyone to his presence. No security detail, no assistance, nothing to distinguish him from the countless others rushing to their gates. Yet, despite his intent to remain incognito, it didn't take long for the atmosphere around him to subtly shift. A few people began to do double takes, their gazes lingering as recognition slowly dawned. Whispers rippled through the crowd like a low tide, subdued at first but gaining momentum as more people caught on. "Is that?" A young woman in a navy blazer murmured to her friend, clutching a tablet tightly against her chest. Her companion squinted, then gasped. "No way. Can't be. What would he be doing here?" Nearby, a man in a bright Hawaiian shirt glanced over, overhearing their exchange. He turned to follow their gaze, his expression quickly transforming into one of shock. "Holy! Yeah, that's him. That's Elon Musk." The whispers grew louder, drawing attention like a beacon. Travelers paused mid-stride, craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the man at the center of the commotion. A few bold individuals fumbled with their phones, trying to snap discreet pictures while pretending to check their notifications. Elon, for his part, seemed unfazed. If he noticed the growing buzz around him, he gave no indication. His pace remained steady as he approached a row of chairs near a departure gate. A small child, perched on one of the seats, swung his legs idly as his mother dug through her bag for snacks. The boy's eyes lit up when he saw Elon, pointing excitedly as he turned to his mother. "Mom! Mom! Look! It's Iron Man!" the boy exclaimed, confusing the billionaire with his cinematic counterpart, Tony Stark. The mother glanced up, startled, before realizing who her son was referring to. Her expression shifted from irritation to awe, and she quickly hushed the boy, pulling him close. "That's not Iron Man, sweetheart," she whispered, though her own tone betrayed her excitement. "That's Elon Musk." The scene might have passed without further incident if not for the sharp voice that suddenly cut through the air like a knife. "Excuse me, you're in the way." Everyone turned to see the source of the disruption. A middle-aged man in a gray blazer, his face twisted into an expression of irritation. He was wheeling an oversized suitcase that bumped noisily against the tiled floor, the sound grating on already frayed nerves. The man's eyes zeroed in on Elon, who had unknowingly stopped in his path while observing the commotion around him. "Some of us have places to be," the man snapped, his voice carrying over the hushed murmurs of the crowd. "If you're done playing celebrity, maybe you could move out of the way?" A few gasps rippled through the onlookers, who couldn't believe the audacity of someone addressing Elon Musk in such a tone. Even the boy from earlier froze, his mouth open in shock as he stared at the man. Elon turned to face him, his expression calm but curious. "I wasn't aware I was blocking your path," he said evenly, his voice carrying just enough authority to make the man hesitate. The man, however, seemed emboldened by the attention, mistaking Elon's composed demeanor for weakness. "Well, you are," he said, gesturing wildly at the open space around them. "This is an airport, not a fan club meeting. People are trying to get to their flights." The tension in the terminal was palpable now, the noise of rolling suitcases and distant announcements fading into the background. All eyes were on the exchange, the crowd holding its collective breath. "Perhaps you're right," Elon said after a pause, stepping aside with a slight nod. "I wouldn't want to delay anyone's journey." The man snorted, his victory short-lived as he muttered something under his breath and continued on his way. But even as he disappeared into the crowd, the unease lingered. The onlookers exchanged glances, their respect for Elon only growing as he chose to de-escalate the situation. Yet the commotion had caught the attention of others nearby. Specifically, a group of men lounging near a coffee kiosk, their leather jackets emblazoned with the logo of a local motorcycle club. They had been watching the scene unfold with thinly veiled amusement, their laughter low and derisive. "Look at that," one of them said, nudging his companion. "Big shot billionaire getting told off by some nobody. Guess money doesn't buy you respect after all." The others chuckled, their eyes narrowing as they sized up Elon from a distance. There was something predatory about their demeanor, a casual cruelty that made the crowd instinctively steer clear of them. "Think he'd mind if we introduced ourselves?" Another biker said, his grin widening. "Might be fun to see if he's as tough as he looks in all those magazine covers." The leader of the group, a burly man with a shaved head and a scar running down his cheek, leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Let's wait," he said, his voice low but commanding. "Let him settle in first. No point rushing a good show." Near the coffee kiosk, the group of bikers, clad in their signature leather jackets, continued to watch Elon with growing interest. Their conversation had shifted from idle amusement to something more deliberate, their laughter carrying an edge that set the nearby travelers on edge. The leader of the group, the burly man with the scar, leaned against the counter, his eyes fixed on Elon like a hawk circling its prey. "You know what I think?" the scarred man said, his voice low but carrying enough weight to silence the others. "I think people like him think they're better than the rest of us. Strolling in here like he owns the place, acting all high and mighty. Someone needs to remind him that money doesn't make you untouchable." One of the other bikers, a wiry man with a crooked grin, chuckled. "You gonna be the one to do it, boss?" he asked, his tone both mocking and eager. The scarred man smirked, his eyes narrowing. "We'll see," he said, his voice dripping with menace. "But I think we owe it to everyone here to bring him down a peg." The group chuckled darkly, their attention now fully focused on Elon. Around them, travelers hurried past, their steps quickening as they tried to avoid the intimidating group. Yet, despite their attempts to stay unnoticed, one woman accidentally brushed against one of the bikers as she reached for a coffee cup. "Hey!" the biker snapped, his voice loud enough to make everyone within earshot flinch. He turned to the woman, his expression a mixture of annoyance and aggression. "Watch where you're going." The woman froze, her face pale as she stammered out an apology. "I am sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to?" the biker interrupted, stepping closer to her. "Maybe you should pay more attention next time." The scarred man placed a hand on his shoulder, his smirk widening. "Relax," he said, though his tone was anything but reassuring. "No need to scare her off just yet. We've got bigger fish to fry." The woman took the opportunity to back away, her hands shaking as she clutched her coffee cup and disappeared into the crowd. The bikers barely noticed, their attention already back on Elon. As the group made their way toward him, the tension in the terminal became palpable. Travelers who had been lingering nearby quickly found reasons to move away, their glances darting between Elon and the approaching bikers. The crowd had seen enough to know that trouble was brewing, and no one wanted to be caught in the middle of it. Elon, however, remained seated, his expression calm as he observed the bikers' approach. He had noticed them earlier, of course, their laughter, their presence, the way they carried themselves. It was impossible not to, yet he had chosen not to react, his focus instead on the quiet hum of the terminal and the occasional glance at the arrival and departure screens. The bikers stopped a few feet away, their leader stepping forward with a confident swagger. His scar caught the light as he tilted his head, his smirk both taunting and predatory. Well, the leader said, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of anyone still within earshot. "If it isn't the man of the hour, Elon Musk, right? What brings someone like you to a place like this?" Elon glanced up, his expression unreadable. Traveling, he said simply. His tone was polite but detached, as though he had already decided not to engage with whatever game the bikers were playing. The leader chuckled, his companions joining in like a pack of hyenas. Traveling, huh? Must be nice having your private jets and all. But I guess even billionaires have to slum it with the rest of us sometimes. Elon didn't respond, his gaze steady as he met the leader's eyes. The silence that followed was deafening, the crowd holding its breath as they watched the exchange unfold. The leader's smirk faltered for a brief moment before he recovered, his bravado intensifying. "Not much of a talker, are you?" he said. "That's fine. We've got plenty to say." He gestured to his gang, who stepped closer, their presence now impossible to ignore. One of them, the wiry man from earlier, leaned against a nearby column, his arms crossed as he sneered at Elon. "You know," the wiry man said, his voice dripping with mockery, "you've got a lot of fans around here. People can't stop whispering about you. But I gotta say, I don't see what the big deal is." "Yeah," another biker chimed in, his voice rough and sarcastic. "You're just a guy in a suit. What makes you so special?" Elon remained silent, his composure unshaken. His lack of reaction only seemed to fuel the bikers' frustration, their taunts growing louder and more pointed. "What's the matter?" the leader asked, his smirk widening. "Cat got your tongue? Or are you too busy calculating how much money you make every second?" The bikers laughed, their voices grating against the uneasy murmurs of the crowd. The tension was thick now, the air heavy with anticipation. Yet, despite their efforts to provoke him, Elon refused to take the bait. The leader's smirk twisted into a scowl as his patience wore thin. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Standing there all calm, acting like we don't matter. But I'll tell you something, Musk. Out here, money doesn't mean a damn thing. Respect does. And you're not gonna get any from us." But Elon didn't move. He didn't flinch. His calm, unshaken demeanor remained a silent challenge, a mirror reflecting the bikers' insecurities back at them. And though they didn't realize it yet, their carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack. The growing crowd of onlookers, though keeping a safe distance, seemed to hold its collective breath, unsure of what would happen next. The bikers, emboldened by their leader's taunts, had fully committed to their spectacle. To them, this wasn't just a chance encounter. It was an opportunity to assert dominance, to make a statement in front of their small-town audience. The scar-faced leader smirked, his hands resting casually on his belt as he tilted his head toward Elon. "You know, it's funny," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the terminal. "You've got all this money, all this power, and yet here you are, sitting in the same airport as the rest of us. Guess the high life isn't all it's cracked up to be." "Huh?" Elon didn't respond. His gaze remained steady, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the biker's aggression. The lack of reaction only seemed to irritate the leader further, his smirk twisting into something more malicious. "What's the matter?" the leader continued, his tone mocking. "Too good to talk to us? Or maybe you're just not used to being around people who don't bow down to you." The wiry biker, still leaning against the nearby column, chuckled darkly. "Yeah, maybe he's scared," he said, his crooked grin widening. "Big bad billionaire can't handle a little heat." Another biker, a burly man with a gruff voice, chimed in. "Maybe he's got one of those robots to do his talking for him," he said, drawing laughter from the group. The crowd stirred uneasily, their discomfort growing as the bikers' taunts became more pointed. A few people glanced around as if searching for airport security, but none seemed to be in sight. Others whispered among themselves, their concern evident as they watched the bikers close in on Elon. The scar-faced leader took a step closer, his boots echoing against the tiled floor. "You know what I think?" he said, his voice low and menacing. "I think you're just like the rest of them. All talk, no backbone. Hiding behind your money and your reputation. Thinking that makes you untouchable." Still, Elon remained silent. His calm gaze never wavered, even as the leader leaned in, his smirk now inches from Elon's face. "But here's the thing," the leader continued, his tone dripping with mockery. Out here, none of that matters. Out here, respect is earned, not bought. And right now, you're not earning any. The wiry biker took the opportunity to step forward, his grin widening as he reached into his jacket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "Hey, boss," he said, his voice loud enough to draw more attention. "Think he'd sign this for me? Since he's so big on being everyone's hero." The leader chuckled, his eyes glinting with amusement. "Why not? Let's see if Mr. Musk is feeling generous today." The wiry biker stepped closer, holding the paper out toward Elon. "Come on, man," he said, his tone a mockery of sincerity. "Just one autograph. I promise I won't sell it on eBay for too much." The group erupted into laughter, their jeers echoing through the terminal. The crowd watched in stunned silence, unsure of whether to intervene or wait for someone else to step in. The boy from earlier, still clutching his mother's hand, looked up at her with wide eyes. "Why are they being so mean?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. Elon finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, he reached out and took the crumpled paper from the wiry biker's hand. The crowd gasped, their whispers growing louder as they tried to make sense of his actions. The wiry biker's grin widened, his confidence bolstered by what he saw as Elon's submission. "That's more like it," he said, his tone smug. "See? Even billionaires know when to." Before he could finish his sentence, Elon held the paper up and tore it cleanly in half. The sound of the paper ripping was deafening in the sudden silence that followed. The wiry biker's grin vanished, replaced by a look of shock and anger. "What the hell, man?" he snapped, his voice rising. "You think that's funny?" Elon's gaze remained calm as he met the wiry biker's glare. "I think respect goes both ways," he said simply. The leader's smirk faltered, his expression darkening as he stepped forward. "You've got a lot of nerve," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can just walk in here and act like you're better than us?" "I don't think I'm better than anyone," Elon said, his voice calm but firm. "But I don't let people push me around either." The crowd, emboldened by Elon's quiet defiance, began to murmur in agreement. A few people even clapped, their small show of support cutting through the oppressive atmosphere. The leader's face turned red, his fists clenching at his sides. "You think this is a joke?" he growled. "You've got no idea who you're messing with." "Neither do you," Elon replied evenly. The leader took another step forward, his expression twisted with rage. "You're gonna regret this," he snarled. "I'll make damn sure of it." The crowd held its breath, the tension in the terminal reaching a breaking point. The bikers, sensing their leader's anger, closed ranks, their aggressive postures daring anyone to intervene. But Elon didn't flinch. The bikers, emboldened by the growing attention, fed off the unease radiating from the crowd. Elon Musk, still standing tall and composed, continued to be the silent centerpiece of their provocation. His calm demeanor only served to stoke the gang's aggression further. Scar-faced, the leader sneered as he stepped closer to Elon, now clearly relishing the chance to make a spectacle of himself. He turned to the crowd with an exaggerated shrug, arms wide as if performing for an audience. "You all see this?" he jeered, pointing a thumb at Elon. "The so-called genius billionaire can't even handle a little heat from some regular guys like us." His companions chuckled darkly, fanning out slightly to block Elon in and make their presence even more intimidating. One of them, a stocky biker with a tattoo snaking up his neck, shoved a nearby luggage cart aside with a loud clatter, sending it spinning into the walkway. The noise made a few onlookers flinch, drawing gasps from the crowd. A young mother hurriedly grabbed her child and backed away, muttering something about finding security. But no one else dared step in. It was the kind of scene that made people freeze, hoping to avoid becoming the next target. Scar-faced gestured to his wiry companion, who had recovered from the humiliation of the torn paper earlier. "Show Mr. Big Shot here what happens when you mess with people who don't have billions to fall back on," he said with a sneer. The wiry man, eager to redeem himself, pulled a pack of gum from his jacket pocket and flicked a stick toward Elon's feet. "Think fast," he said mockingly, before stepping closer, puffing out his chest. Musk, I hear you're all about solving problems. How about you solve this one? How's it feel knowing all your money can't buy you an ounce of respect out here? Elon met the wiry biker's glare with quiet resolve, not reacting to the childish display. His lack of response only seemed to enrage the biker further. What? Too scared to speak up now? The man taunted, his voice rising. Or maybe you're just used to people kissing your ass so much you forgot how to talk to normal folks. The scar-faced leader chuckled and took another step forward, deliberately invading Elon's personal space. I'll give you this, he said, his voice dripping with mockery. You've got guts showing your face here without your army of security guards. But guts don't mean much when you've got nothing to back it up. As if on cue, the stocky biker stepped forward, his boots thudding heavily against the floor. Maybe he thinks he's too good for us, he said, his tone rough and hostile. Maybe we should teach him a thing or two about what happens when you disrespect the wrong people. The crowd, which had been murmuring nervously, fell silent as the bikers closed in. The tension was so thick it was almost unbearable, and yet Elon remained steadfast. His calm, unyielding presence was both a source of admiration and frustration for the onlookers, who couldn't understand why he wasn't fighting back. The scar-faced leader, clearly enjoying the attention, smirked and turned to the crowd. What do you all think? He called out, his voice loud and theatrical. Should we show Mr. Musk here what it's like to live in the real world? There was no response. The onlookers averted their gazes, unwilling to meet the leader's eyes. The silence only seemed to embolden him further. Guess that means yes, he said, turning back to Elon with a menacing grin. Don't worry, we'll make it quick. Before he could say another word, a voice rang out from the crowd. Leave him alone. The bikers froze, their heads snapping toward the source of the interruption. A teenage girl, barely more than 16, stood trembling near the edge of the crowd. Her hands were balled into fists at her sides, her face pale but resolute. You have no right to treat him like this, she said, her voice shaking but determined. He hasn't done anything to you. The scar-faced leader let out a bark of laughter, shaking his head in disbelief. You've got to be kidding me, he said, his tone dripping with condescension. A little girl playing hero? That's cute. His gang burst into laughter, their cruel amusement echoing through the terminal. The girl's courage wavered, her resolve faltering as the bikers turned their attention toward her. She took a step back, but her gaze remained fixed on Elon, silently willing him to do something. Elon, however, didn't move. His calm gaze shifted from the girl to the bikers, his expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed as though he was weighing his options, considering whether to intervene or let the situation play out. The scar-faced leader, mistaking Elon's silence for weakness, turned back to him with a sneer. Looks like your fans are getting desperate, he said. But don't worry, we're just getting started. He reached out, grabbing Elon's tie with one hand and pulling him closer. The crowd gasped, a ripple of fear and outrage spreading through the onlookers. The bikers laughed, their bravado reaching new heights as they reveled in their perceived victory. But Elon remained unshaken. His calm, unwavering demeanor was like a mirror, reflecting the bikers' insecurities back at them. And though they didn't realize it yet, the cracks in their facade were starting to show. The scar-faced leader tightened his grip on the tie, his smirk widening. You're awfully quiet for someone who's supposed to be so smart, he said. What's the matter? Run out of clever ideas. Elon's gaze remained steady, his voice calm as he finally spoke. Respect is earned, he said simply, not demanded. The leader's smirk faltered, his confidence wavering for the first time. The crowd, emboldened by Elon's quiet defiance, began to stir, their murmurs growing louder as they sensed a shift in the dynamic. But the bikers weren't ready to back down. Not yet. The stocky biker stepped forward, his fists clenched as he glared at Elon. You think you're better than us? He growled. Let's see how tough you really are. The atmosphere in the terminal was suffocating, thick with tension and anticipation. Elon Musk's unflinching calmness in the face of the bikers' aggression was both unnerving and inspiring to those who watched from the sidelines. The scar-faced leader, still gripping Elon's tie, glared at him with a mix of frustration and defiance, his bravado teetering on the edge of collapse. "Respect is earned? Huh?" The leader sneered, his voice loud enough to silence the crowd's murmurs. "You think standing there and saying a few clever lines makes you some kind of hero? Newsflash, Musk, you're just a guy. And out here, nobody cares how many billions you've got." The wiry biker stepped forward again, emboldened by his leader's words. "Yeah," he chimed in, his crooked grin back in place. "Out here, it's about who's willing to stand their ground. And from where I'm standing, you're looking pretty damn outnumbered." He gestured to the rest of the gang, who had formed a loose semicircle around Elon, their leather jackets glinting in the terminal's harsh fluorescent light. The crowd watched in horrified silence, some clutching their phones as if debating whether to call for help or record the unfolding scene. "You want to prove something?" The scar-faced leader continued, releasing Elon's tie with a sharp tug. "Go ahead. Say something. Do something. Show us why everyone around here is looking at you like you're some kind of saint." Elon adjusted his tie, his movements deliberate and unhurried. His silence only seemed to fuel the bikers' aggression, their taunts growing louder and more pointed. "Cat got your tongue," the stocky biker said, his voice rough and mocking. "Or maybe you're just too scared to admit you've got nothing to say." The scar-faced leader smirked, stepping even closer to Elon. "I'll tell you what," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "Why don't we make this interesting? You've got all this money, right? Let's see how much it's worth to you." The leader pulled a small knife from his pocket, flipping it open with a theatrical flourish. The blade gleamed under the harsh lights, drawing a collective gasp from the crowd. He held it up for everyone to see, his smirk widening as he relished the attention. "Relax," he said, his tone falsely reassuring. "I'm not gonna hurt you, just your pride." With that, he reached out and slashed at Elon's tie, cutting it cleanly in half. The severed fabric fluttered to the ground, a silent symbol of the bikers' growing dominance. The crowd gasped again, their whispers rising into a nervous hum. Elon remained still, his gaze steady as he met the leader's eyes. His lack of reaction only seemed to irritate the bikers further, their taunts growing louder and more aggressive. "What's the matter?" the wiry biker said, his grin widening. "Too scared to fight back? Or are you just gonna stand there and let us walk all over you?" The stocky biker picked up the severed tie, holding it up like a trophy. "This is what happens when you think you're better than everyone else," he said, his voice rough and taunting. "Out here, nobody cares who you are." The scar-faced leader turned to the crowd, his arms spread wide as if inviting them to join in. "See this?" he called out, his voice booming. "This is what happens when you don't know your place. You get put back in it." The bikers laughed, their voices echoing through the terminal. The crowd, now visibly uncomfortable, shifted uneasily, their concern growing as the situation escalated. But the bikers weren't finished. Not yet. The wiry biker stepped forward again, his grin now a full-blown sneer. "You know what I think?" he said, his voice low and menacing. "I think you're just a coward. All that money, all that power, and you can't even stand up for yourself." The scar-faced leader chuckled, his smirk widening. "Maybe he's just waiting for his fans to save him," he said, his tone mocking. "Or maybe he's hoping someone will call the cops. Hate to break it to you, Musk, but out here it's every man for himself." The stocky biker nodded, his expression darkening. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough. "And right now, you're on your own." The crowd, sensing the rising hostility, began to whisper urgently among themselves. Some edged closer to the exit, while others glanced around for security. But no one moved to intervene. The fear of becoming the next target was too great. The bikers, sensing their advantage, closed ranks around Elon, their aggressive postures daring him to respond. The leader stepped forward again, his voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. "You've got one chance," he said, his eyes narrowing. "One chance to show us you're not the spineless coward we think you are. Otherwise, we're gonna make sure everyone here knows exactly who you are and what you're not." The tension was unbearable now, the crowd holding its collective breath as they waited for Elon's response. The bikers, their confidence bolstered by the lack of intervention, were ready to push the situation to its breaking point. But Elon didn't flinch. He didn't move. His calm, unshaken demeanor was a quiet challenge, a mirror reflecting the bikers' insecurities back at them. And though they didn't realize it yet, their bravado was beginning to crack. The scar-faced leader, clearly frustrated by Elon's lack of reaction, sneered and turned to his gang. "You know what?" he said, his tone mocking. "I don't think he's worth the effort. Let's find someone who actually matters." The bikers laughed, their voices harsh and cruel as they turned their attention to the crowd. Their leader gestured toward a young couple standing near the edge of the terminal, their expressions a mix of fear and defiance. "What about them?" the leader said, his smirk widening. "Think they'd be more fun to play with?" The couple froze, their fear evident as the bikers turned toward them. The crowd, sensing the shift in focus, began to murmur urgently, their concern growing as the bikers closed in. But Elon remained still, his gaze never wavering as he watched the scene unfold. His calm, unshaken presence was a quiet reminder that the situation was far from over. And though the bikers didn't realize it yet, their time was running out. The scar-faced leader turned his back on Elon Musk, as if dismissing him entirely, and pointed toward the young couple huddling near the edge of the terminal. His cruel smirk widened as he addressed his gang. "Let's show everyone here what happens when you mess with people like us," he said, his voice dripping with menace. The crowd murmured nervously, unsure whether to stay and watch or flee the scene entirely. The wiry biker, ever the eager follower, stepped toward the couple, his crooked grin gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "You two look like you could use a little advice," he sneered. "Maybe a lesson or two on why it's a bad idea to stand around gawking." The young man, who couldn't have been more than 25, instinctively placed himself in front of his girlfriend, his face pale but resolute. "Leave us alone," he said, his voice shaking but determined. "We didn't do anything to you." The bikers laughed, their mocking voices echoing through the terminal. The stocky biker cracked his knuckles loudly, stepping closer to the couple. "Oh, we know you didn't," he said, his voice rough and threatening. "But see, you're in our way. And around here, that's enough." The young woman clutched her boyfriend's arm, her eyes wide with fear. She glanced around desperately, hoping someone in the crowd would step in. But all she saw were averted gazes and nervous whispers. It was clear that no one wanted to risk becoming the next target. The scar-faced leader turned back to Elon, his smirk now a full-blown sneer. "You see this," he said, gesturing toward the couple. "This is what happens when people forget their place. Maybe you should take notes." Elon's expression remained calm, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of something more, something that the bikers, caught up in their own bravado, failed to notice. He didn't move, didn't speak, but his presence alone was enough to make the tension in the room almost unbearable. The wiry biker reached out, grabbing the young man by the collar and pulling him forward. "You think you're tough? Huh?" he taunted, his voice loud and mocking. "Think you can stand up to us?" The young man struggled against the wiry biker's grip, his fear evident but his determination unwavering. "Let us go," he said through gritted teeth. "You don't have to do this." The wiry biker laughed, a harsh, grating sound that made the crowd flinch. "Oh, but we do," he said, shoving the young man backward. "See, it's not about what we have to do. It's about what we want to do." The scar-faced leader chuckled, his gaze shifting back to Elon. "What about you, Musk?" he called out, his tone mocking. "You gonna stand there and let this happen? Or are you finally gonna show us what you're made of?" Elon's eyes locked onto the leader's, his calm expression unchanged. For a moment, it seemed as though he wouldn't respond at all. But then, in a voice that was calm but carried an unmistakable edge, he said, "You're making a mistake." The leader's smirk faltered for a brief moment before he recovered, his bravado returning in full force. "A mistake?" he echoed, his tone dripping with mockery. "The only mistake here is you thinking you can tell us what to do." The stocky biker, sensing his leader's irritation, stepped closer to Elon, his fists clenched. Yeah, he said, his voice rough and aggressive. You've got a big mouth for someone who hasn't done anything but stand there. The crowd, sensing that the situation was about to escalate further, began to shift nervously. A few people pulled out their phones, either to record what was happening or to call for help, but no one dared to intervene. The fear of drawing the biker's attention was too great. The wiry biker, still holding onto the young man's collar, sneered at Elon. "Is this your idea of helping?" he taunted. "Standing there while we teach this punk a lesson?" The young woman, her voice trembling, called out to Elon. "Please," she said, her eyes filled with desperation. "Please, do something." Elon's gaze flicked toward her, and for a brief moment, his calm facade softened. But when he turned back to the bikers, his expression was once again unreadable. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice steady but firm. "Whatever point you're trying to prove, this isn't the way." The scar-faced leader laughed, a harsh, cruel sound that echoed through the terminal. "And what would you know about it?" he said, his tone mocking. "You think you can just waltz in here with your fancy suit and your big name and tell us how to live our lives?" Elon's response was simple, yet it carried a weight that silenced even the leader. "Respect is earned," he said, his voice calm but unyielding. "And so is the lack of it." The leader's smirk faltered again, his confidence wavering as he stared into Elon's unwavering gaze. But he quickly recovered, his bravado returning as he turned back to his gang. "Enough of this," he said, his tone sharp and commanding. "Let's finish what we started." The bikers closed in on the young couple, their aggressive postures leaving no doubt about their intentions. The crowd watched in stunned silence, their fear and helplessness palpable. But just as the leader reached for the young man, Elon stepped forward, his presence commanding attention like a thunderclap. The bikers froze, their confidence shaken by the sudden shift in dynamics. "What are you gonna do?" the leader sneered, his voice wavering slightly. "Talk us to death?" Elon Musk stood firm, his calm demeanor now carrying a silent authority that demanded attention. The bikers, who had thrived on intimidation and bravado, suddenly found themselves caught in the shifting tide. The scar-faced leader sneered, trying to mask the growing unease that prickled at the back of his neck. "What's the plan, Musk?" he taunted, though his voice no longer carried the same weight. "You think standing there all high and mighty is gonna scare us off?" Elon didn't respond. Instead, he took another deliberate step forward, closing the distance between himself and the bikers. His gaze locked onto the scar-faced leaders, steady and unyielding, as though stripping away the man's layers of false confidence with each passing second. The leader's smirk wavered. He opened his mouth to speak again, but the words died on his lips. For the first time, he seemed to realize that the crowd wasn't laughing with him. The murmurs of the onlookers had shifted, their tones hushed but pointed. Words like disgusting, cowards, and bullies floated through the air, sharp and cutting. The wiry biker, still clutching the young man's collar, glanced nervously at the crowd. His crooked grin faltered, replaced by a flicker of doubt. "Boss," he said quietly, his voice lacking its usual bravado, "maybe we should—" "Shut up," the leader snapped, his voice sharp and defensive. He turned toward his gang, his scar catching the light as his frustration bubbled to the surface. "They don't matter. None of them do. You think anyone here is gonna step up? They're just sheep, like the rest of them." But even as he spoke, his words rang hollow. The crowd, emboldened by Elon's quiet defiance, had begun to stir. A few people pulled out their phones, not to record but to call for help. Others whispered urgently among themselves, their glances toward the bikers carrying a newfound defiance. The stocky biker shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between the crowd and his leader. "Boss," he muttered, his voice low, "maybe this isn't—" "I said shut up," the leader barked, his voice cracking under the weight of his fraying authority. He turned back to Elon, his smirk forced and brittle. "You think you've won?" he said, his tone desperate. "You think standing there and staring me down makes you a hero?" Elon took another step forward, his calm gaze unwavering. "This isn't about winning," he said. his voice steady but firm. "It's about doing what's right." The leader's hands clenched into fists, his frustration boiling over. "You don't get to lecture me," he shouted, his voice echoing through the terminal. "You don't know anything about me or my life." "Maybe I don't," Elon replied evenly. "But I know enough to see when someone's lost sight of themselves." The crowd murmured in agreement, their whispers growing louder as they watched the biker's bravado crumble. The wiry biker released his grip on the young man, his crooked grin now replaced by a look of uncertainty. The stocky biker took a step back, his confidence shaken. The leader, however, refused to back down. He pointed a finger at Elon, his voice trembling with anger. "You think you're better than me," he said, his tone accusing. "You think you can walk in here and make me look like a fool?" "I don't have to," Elon said simply. His words, though quiet, struck with the force of a sledgehammer. The crowd murmured again, their support for him now undeniable. The leader's face turned red, his scar standing out starkly against his flushed skin. He looked around, as if searching for an ally, but found only the wary faces of his gang and the disapproving stares of the crowd. The weight of their judgment pressed down on him, suffocating and inescapable. The young man, who had been clutching his girlfriend protectively, stepped forward cautiously. "You've already lost," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "No one here is on your side. Just walk away." The leader's head snapped toward him, his eyes blazing with anger. "You don't tell me what to do," he snarled, but the venom in his voice lacked its earlier bite. The wiry biker tugged at his sleeve, his nervousness now impossible to hide. "Boss," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "maybe we should go." The stocky biker nodded, his earlier aggression replaced by unease. "Yeah," he muttered, "this is getting out of hand." The leader looked at his gang, his frustration and desperation etched into every line of his face. For a moment, it seemed as though he might lash out again, but the weight of the crowd's judgment and Elon's unwavering presence was too much to bear. With a growl of frustration, he threw his hands up in defeat. "Fine," he spat, his voice bitter. "We're leaving, but don't think this is over." The bikers turned to leave, their swagger gone and their heads bowed low. The crowd watched in silence, their relief palpable as the gang disappeared into the terminal. Elon, still standing tall, glanced around at the onlookers. His calm demeanor hadn't faltered once, even as the tension in the room had reached its breaking point. The young couple approached him hesitantly, their gratitude written across their faces. "Thank you," the young man said, his voice trembling. "We didn't know what to do." "You didn't have to," Elon replied, his tone gentle. "Sometimes, standing your ground is enough." The crowd began to clap, their applause growing louder as the tension dissolved into relief and admiration. Elon nodded politely, his expression calm as he turned to leave. But the impact of his actions lingered, a quiet reminder that even the most intimidating challenges can be met with resolve and integrity. The terminal slowly returned to normal after the bikers' departure, though the echoes of their confrontation lingered in the air. People resumed their routines, checking their boarding passes, gathering luggage and grabbing coffee. But their glances toward Elon Musk were different now. It wasn't just recognition. It was admiration, respect, and gratitude. Elon quietly walked toward the young couple, who were still visibly shaken. The young man had his arm around his girlfriend, and she was clutching him tightly, tears welling up in her eyes. They looked at Elon, unsure of how to express their thanks. "I'm just glad you're safe," Elon said softly, his tone gentle yet firm. "You stood up when it mattered. That takes real courage." The young man nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "We couldn't have done it without you," he said. "You didn't have to step in, but you did." "Thank you." Elon gave a small smile, his humility evident despite the power of what he had just done. "The right thing doesn't need permission," he replied. "You're stronger than you think. Remember that." As Elon began to walk away, he was approached by a middle-aged woman who had been part of the crowd. She hesitated before speaking, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "thank you for what you did back there. Not just for them, but for all of us." It's not every day someone stands up to people like that. Elon gave a slight nod, his demeanor modest despite the praise. No one deserves to be treated like that, he said. Sometimes, all it takes is one person to remind others what's right. The crowd had thinned, but a few people lingered, their phones tucked away, watching Elon with quiet awe. They weren't interested in selfies or autographs. They were simply grateful, their expressions saying what words could not. As Elon made his way to the gate, a security officer finally appeared, slightly flustered and out of breath. "Mr. Musk," the officer began, "we just got word of what happened. I'm so sorry we weren't there sooner." "It's all right," Elon said, his tone reassuring. "It's handled now. Just make sure everyone feels safe moving forward." The officer nodded, clearly embarrassed, but Elon waved off any further apologies. "We all have a role to play," he said simply. As he walked through the terminal, passengers parted for him. Not out of fear or celebrity deference, but out of respect. He didn't bask in the attention, nor did he hurry to escape it. He simply moved forward, leaving behind a terminal full of people who would never forget the day they saw Elon Musk stand up to a group of bullies. By the time he reached his gate, the echoes of the confrontation had faded into the hum of the terminal. Elon glanced out the window, watching planes taxiing on the runway. He exhaled deeply, not out of relief, but resolve. Moments like this, he knew, were where true leadership was born, not in boardrooms or on stages, but in everyday actions that set an example for others. As he boarded his plane, a young boy waved to him from his seat. Elon smiled and waved back, a small but meaningful gesture. The boy beamed, nudging his mother and whispering, "That's Elon Musk." "Yes, it is," his mother replied, her voice filled with pride. "And he just showed us what being a real leader means." As the plane prepared for takeoff, Elon leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes for a moment. He wasn't thinking about the confrontation or the applause. Instead, he was thinking about how many more people he could inspire, not with words but with actions. Because at the end of the day, Elon Musk wasn't just a billionaire or an innovator. He was a man who believed in making the world better, one small stand at a time. What would you do if you found yourself in a situation like this? Watching Elon Musk, a man known for his brilliance in technology and innovation, stand his ground in the face of intimidation was nothing short of inspiring. But his actions weren't just about stopping bullies. They carried a deeper message that we all need to hear. Elon didn't need to get involved. He could have walked away, ignoring the bikers and avoiding confrontation altogether. Yet he didn't. Why? Because sometimes it's not about what you have to do, it's about what's right. How often do we find ourselves in situations where we see something wrong happening, yet we hesitate? Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's the hope that someone else will step up. But the truth is, change starts with us. It starts with one person deciding that enough is enough. Let's take a moment to think about what this story teaches us. First, courage isn't about being fearless. It's about acting despite fear. The people in the terminal were scared, and rightfully so. But Elon's calm presence gave them hope. Sometimes, all it takes is one person to inspire others to find their own courage. Could you be that person the next time you see someone in need? Second, respect is earned through actions, not demanded through intimidation. The bikers tried to assert their dominance through fear and cruelty, but it only highlighted their own insecurities. In contrast, Elon showed us that true strength comes from standing firm in your values. You don't need to fight or shout to make a difference. Sometimes your quiet resolve is more powerful than any words. And finally, this story reminds us of the ripple effect our actions can have. Elon's decision to step in didn't just protect the young couple. It sent a message to everyone watching. It reminded them that there's more good in the world than bad, and that even in moments of darkness, there's always a chance for light to shine through. Now, let me ask you, what would you have done if you were there? Would you have stood up like Elon did? Or would fear have held you back? It's a tough question, but it's one worth thinking about. Because the next time you're faced with a situation like this, you might be the one someone else is looking to for courage. If this story moved you, inspired you, or gave you something to think about, don't forget to let us know in the comments. Share your thoughts, your stories, or even your questions. And if you believe more people need to hear about acts of kindness and bravery like this, hit that like button and share this video with your friends. Most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of the power of humanity. Because in a world that often feels divided, it's stories like these that bring us together. And who knows, maybe next time you'll be the one who stands up, speaks out, and inspires the world.